Hello and welcome to Communicating Economics. I'm here with Soumaya Keynes, formerly an economist at the IFS and now economics correspondent at The Economist. Soumaya, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
You are now at The Economist, used to be an economist. What do you wish you knew when you were an economist that you now know as a journalist?
So the first thing is that journalists have no time. So when you're writing research, you need to put your headlines clearly and early in whatever you're writing. They really need to be told very clearly and very quickly what the key takeaways are, why you should be surprised or why you should care, why this is important. The second thing, I think, is that academics care about different things to the public, right? So you really need to think about your audience. And just because you've got some, new amazing data set, that isn't necessarily going to overlap with why the public thinks this is interesting. So, practicing on your mum, trying to make her care about whatever you're working on is quite useful. The third thing I think is that it should be fun. When you present your findings or you think about your findings, you've often been working on something for so long and you've got so deep into the data that when you finally get out the other end and present your findings, it's kind of, you get lost in all that work that went into it. But it's really important to communicate, the enthusiasm and to show the audience why you have spent so much time working on this thing. I think the final thing I'd say is that people matter. Right, so when you're giving your findings and you say that this policy impacts income and raises income by 2% or cuts income by 4%, it's quite difficult for people to get a handle on that. And so wherever possible, you need to try and anchor it to specific examples of specific people. And they don't need to be completely hypothetical. A single mum of 3 would be affected by this in this way, right? That gives people something really tangible that then they can understand. Otherwise, when you give these numbers, people are just going to say, well, that's an average and it doesn't apply to me and it's difficult to relate to.
I wonder whether you could talk a little bit about the narrative and fitting your research into the narrative.
Ultimately, you need to tell stories. And you should really be doing this anyway in your papers, right? You have the context, you have, the kind of existing literature where we are now, you then have your method and then, your result and your conclusion. The basic structure is the same, but it really needs to be at the front of your mind that you're telling a story, you're telling a progression. Either it's historical or it's, we thought this now and now we think this, right? But that line has to be there. It can't just be a set of interesting facts that you found. They have to be connected in some way, because otherwise it's just completely overwhelming.
So in summary then, what do you wish you'd known when you were an economist before being a journalist?
People like people, people matter, stories matter, and the telling of the story is as important as the identification itself.
Fantastic, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks very much for having me.
And for more tools and tips for how to communicate economics, join us at communicatingeconomics.com.